Lavender Literary Society members and guests, good evening and welcome to the final author talk of the 2025 season. This evening, we are honored to present Tourmaline's book, Marsha. Written with sparkling prose, Tourmaline's richly researched biography, Marsha, finally brings this iconic figure to life in full color. We vividly meet Marsha P. Johnson as both an activist and artist. She performed with RuPaul and with the internationally renowned drag troupe, the Hot Peaches. She was a muse to countless artists from Andy Warhol to the band Earth, Wind, and Fire, and she continues to inspire many of us today. My name is Suhaili Bautista Carolina. I use she, they pronouns. I am the Chief of Programs at the American LGBTQ Museum, a new cultural institution dedicated to preserving, researching, and sharing LGBTQ history and culture. Our vision is a world where all people experience the joy of queer liberation. I'm going to give a very short visual description. I am a Black Latinx woman wearing gold framed glasses. I have blonde braids, and I'm wearing red lipstick. While our first physical galleries are still a few years into the future, our work at the museum is already underway. Over the past 3 years, we have produced a robust slate of free public programming with partners across the country, toured an award-winning exhibition to 5 major US cities, and launched our Lavender Literary Society book club, which you get to experience this evening. When we open our doors as New York City's newest museum, we will tell the stories of queer people across time, place, and identity. The museum will be a space for celebration, remembrance, and connection, a place where queer magic is real, our ancestors are honored, and our stories are told with power and pride. But you don't have to wait until 2027 to be part of our story. You can join us now through public programs like this one, traveling exhibitions, our newsletter, our book club, or by becoming a founding member. Every gift or support, every act of visibility helps build this museum from the ground up. And you can learn more about the American LGBTQ Museum at americanlgbtqmuseum.org. For those of you joining the Lavender Literary Society for the first time tonight, we'd like to begin by sharing a bit about our book club. The American LGBTQ Museum Book Club is a space for community and connection, bridging generations through the magic of storytelling. Our titles are a mix of popular queer history, memoir, graphic novels, with inspiring authors and iconic guest facilitators. Through virtual and in-person gatherings, we aim to ignite intergenerational dialogue and foster understanding, empathy, and unity. Together, we traverse the landscapes of queer culture, savoring the nuances and complexities that make our stories uniquely ours. This isn't just a book club, it's a movement. Reading together becomes a powerful act, a catalyst for change, and a testament to the resilience of the LGBTQ spirit. Participants will be part of something extraordinary. And in this book club, we don't just read, we weave the threads of our stories into a tapestry of strength, resilience, and pride. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's author, Tourmaline. A Guggenheim Fellow and Time 100 honoree, Tourmaline is an artist, filmmaker, and writer. Tourmaline's history-making book, Marsha, is the first definitive biography of the revolutionary Black trans activist Marsha P. Johnson. It has received a starred review by Publishers Weekly, was selected by the New York Times for the nonfiction spring book preview, and is already a national bestseller. Tourmaline's art is in the permanent collections of the Met, MoMA, Tate, and the Whitney. Her influence in contemporary art has also been showcased in the Venice Biennial and the Whitney Biennial. Tourmaline's award-winning films, including the critically acclaimed Happy Birthday, Marsha, have been widely recognized for their unique blend of historical, narrative, and speculative futurism. Tourmaline's portfolio extends to fashion. Her trans-inclusive swimwear line with Chromat debuted at New York Fashion Week. A former leader of the trans health campaign at the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, Tourmaline has built a career rooted in community organizing and trans liberation and is a transformative voice in movements for racial, economic, and gender justice. Tourmaline is a graduate of Columbia University and lives in Miami with her partner Cameron and their cat Jean. And we're happy to welcome our host, Imara Jones. Imara Jones, whose work has won Emmy and Peabody Awards, is a creator of TransLash Media, a cross-platform nonprofit journalism and narrative organization which produces content to shift the current culture of hostility towards transgender people in the US. She was named by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people on the planet in 2023. As part of her work at TransLash, Imara hosts the TransLash podcast with Imara Jones, which received the 2023 Outstanding Podcast Award from GLAAD, as well as the investigative limited series, The Anti-Trans Hate Machine, A Plot Against Equality, which received the Excellence in Podcasting Award from the National LGBTQ Journalists Association. Imara is also the first trans Black person to ever receive an award from the National Black Journalists Association, having garnered the Journalist of Distinction Award in 2022. Also in 2022, Politico named her as one of the 40 power players at the intersection of race, politics, and policy in the United States. In 2020, Imara was featured on the cover of Time magazine as part of its New American Revolution special edition. In 2019, she chaired the first ever UN high-level meeting on gender diversity with over 600 participants. Imara has been featured regularly in The Guardian, The Nation, MSNBC, CNBC, NPR, Fast Company, and GQ. Imara is a 2021 Nathan Cummings Foundation Fellow and a 2019 Soros Equality Fellow. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Tourmaline and Imara to the virtual stage.
Hello, hey Tourmaline, how are you?
Hi, Amara. How are you?
Well, I'm not freezing like you are. I think it was the wind chill today here was 15 degrees. I think it's slightly warmer in Florida.
It is only ever so slightly warmer. It's about 80 degrees right now.
I'm gonna try to not be upset.
Totally.
We're gonna start out tonight with you reading,
Yeah.
giving us a bit of in your work.
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you to you, Amara. There's just so much work that went into tonight. I'm thrilled to be here, and thanks for all of the organizing that happened to make tonight happen. And thanks everyone for attending on a Thursday night to talk and learn and listen and share about Marsha. So I'm going to read from chapter 4, which is the Star Activist chapter. And it takes place after the Stonewall Uprising of 1969. And I'm going to read for about maybe like 7 to 10 minutes, and I'll skip around through the chapter. So the chapter opens with Marsha basked in the landscape of a newly transformed West Village, a direct result of the rebellion at Stonewall, where once her dancing was restricted to dimly lit mafia bars in the village. In the months that followed the riots, more and more bars and jukebox dance floors were opening for gay people. She still encountered her fair share of signs at the door saying no dogs and no drag, but she was finding new places in the city where she could be herself and join the movement. The newly formed political group Gay Activist Alliance urged closeted members of the community to know their value and come out of hiding. The Gay Liberation Front, a more radical group Marsha and Sylvia Rivera joined, fought for civil rights along the Black Panther Party and the Young Lords Organization, a Puerto Rican community group, and joined global liberation struggles like ending the war in Vietnam. The Gay Liberation Front, much like Marsha, fought to transform the society at large through the open realization of our own consciousness. Marsha transformed consciousness just by being Marsha. She raised consciousness while standing at the subway station, greeting commuters, or walking down Christopher Street, dressed in open defiance of three articles laws. She transformed consciousness as she sashayed solo or marched with the Gay Liberation Front to demand the release of Black Panther Party prisoners at the Women's House of Detention. Marsha radiated possibility in this newly reshaped political and social landscape post Stonewall. On an even more personal level, she fully committed to upending the limits that she had placed and others had placed on her own body. She stopped only wearing scare drag and started dressing as Marsha full time, adorning her face with makeup, beginning hormone replacement therapy, and reveling in the pleasure of her body changing. She loved how her breasts were getting larger and her face was getting softer. When she looked in the mirror, she basked in the reflection, telling WBAI, I have hormone treatments and my bust is it's a small bust, but it's a nice handful. The Stonewall Uprising also inspired Sylvia to dress more as herself. It took me until 1969 to get into full drag all the time, Sylvia said. I was showing the world who I was. Sylvia stayed at Stonewall for 5 days straight during the riots, high on uppers as she loudly proclaimed gay power in the face of the police. I was on my little beauties and they kept me going, she explained. But I just did not want to go anywhere else. I felt that I was going to be free. So then we're going to skip a few months to September 20th, 1970, when New York University refused to allow for gay dance parties that the students wanted to host in support of the larger Gay Liberation Front. A turning point arrived on September 20th, 1970. Following the summer's successful Gay Pride Week and dances at NYU, the Christopher Street Liberation Day organizers requested to return to the NYU venue for 4 additional gay dances. NYU's campus was located in the heart of Greenwich Village and seemed a natural place to organize. When NYU administrators found out about the planned dances, they canceled them, fearing that the gay culture surrounding NYU and all sides would somehow seep into the whole of the student body. The student outcry was immediate. Less than an hour after finding out about the administration, gay students at NYU decided to occupy the student hall by hosting a sleep-in. They invited members of the gay community to join them, regardless of whether they were enrolled at NYU. When Bob Kohler told Sylvia that NYU was cracking down on student life, she rushed to recruit Marsha to join the protest. Marsha, Sylvia, their friends Bubbles, Bambi Lamore, and Endora, and others walked into the air-conditioned NYU student building, Weinstein Hall, which stood just south of Washington Square. NYU, they knew, didn't just regulate gay life in the student population, they also operated Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital, where Marsha and many others in the queer community had long experienced homophobia, transphobia, and racism. Each time I go to Bellevue, they try to kill me, Marsha exclaimed. They fill me up with Thorazine. The first thing the street queens did was wash their clothes in the matron's bathroom sinks and take showers. They used paper towels to dry themselves off in the chilly basement before applying their makeup and venturing out into the common room in the basement to meet the students. Sylvia wore a beautiful blue dress with puffed flowers. She had been growing out her hair and it now nearly reached her shoulders. Even though the NYU administration had turned up the air conditioning to force people out, students sent extra blankets to the freezing activists. The first night of the Weinstein Ball, the first night of the Weinstein Hall takeover was a ball. A few of Sylvia's friends from the gay activist group Gay Liberation Front brought some records, and the students liberated the sound system from the locked closets, and everyone got down. Barriers between street queens and the cisgender lesbians began to fall apart as everyone started to mix together, get high, drink coffee, play cards, and spin the bottle. The Gay Flames newsletter reflected on the utopian nature of the sin. All kinds of us together. Transvestites, middle class people, people used to passing for straight, blacks, whites, Latinos, street people, students, a lot of barriers and tears were broken down. We were coming together in love together, stronger and proud together. Although they weren't NYU students, Marsha, Sylvia, Bubbles, Bambi, and Endora had been responsible for cleaning the space, fundraising, and cooking food. Nearly 10 years later, Sylvia recalled with joy in her voice, Marsha would go out and hustle every night. Every morning she'd come in with coffee and a Danish and everything for everybody. She'd sleep there a while. She says, I'm going home to change, girlie. I leave you in charge. These acts of care foreshadowed her later role of mothering over the years. Marsha loved inhabiting the role of mother, caring for younger street queens and supporting their development. She saw the street queens, including Sylvia, as her children. They in turn saw Miss Marsha as their chosen mother. As my dear friend Leah Lakshmi writes in their book Care Work about the meaning of this kind of gendered disability labor, far too often the emotional labor we do as femmes or feminine people is not seen as labor. It's seen as air. It's not that little thing you do on the side. It's not real organizing, not real work. Just talking about feelings and buying groceries, girl stuff, femme stuff, disabled and sick stuff, not real activists holding a meeting stuff. But those kinds of things are not a sideline or an afterthought to our movements. They are our movements. Marsha and the girlies modeled their food service after the Black Panther Party's community food program, which started a year earlier in Oakland, California. The BPP started their breakfast program based on an understanding that alleviating poverty was central to creating Black liberation. They used the space to further political education, self-actualization, and community power. As members of the Gay Liberation Front, both Marsha and Sylvia had organized alongside members of the Black Panther Party. That experience deeply radicalized them. Inside NYU, Marsha, Sylvia, and Dora, Bambi, and Bubbles began to bring about a vision they had years ago when they were homeless and staying in hourly hotels. They had dreamed of a radically changed world where they would be free to be themselves and where they could live in dignity. At the time, we used to live in the Arista Hotel, Sylvia explained. We used to sit around, we just talk and try to figure out when this harassment would come to an end. And we would always dream that it would come to an end. And we prayed and we looked for it. We wanted to be human beings. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a treat to get to hear you read your own words.
Thank you.
So deeply appreciative of that. I also think that we should Apple should record your voice and make it one of the options.
Let's go.
It would also come with a pretty good check as well, I imagine.
Oh, totally.
Which artists need.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I want to, before we talk about the book,
Yeah.
the things I think is important to hear from you on, and I don't think I've ever asked you this in this way, but excuse me, you kind of, you have done so much to bring the life of Marsha P. Johnson back to life, right? To bring her as a person into public consciousness and have been a part of the restoration of her to where she should be historically in the course of our movement. And that's been a journey that you've been embarked on since you were essentially a teenager, right? Since you were a college student uptown at Columbia during the day, and then at night and on the weekends.
Christopher Street.
Dual life.
Yes.
And I am wondering if you can talk about not only when you first learned about her in this process, but if we think of people as ancestors, right? And in traditional, especially in Black and Indigenous communities, ancestors are never fully gone, right?
That's right.
They are a part of our existence, right?
That's right.
As people who are still sort of living and breathing. And if we think about calling people into our lives at the right moment, right? What was going on for you that you essentially called Marsha into your life and began this, multi-year, almost multi-decade journey of walking with her?
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember the first time I wrote about Marsha, it was 2005, and it was for Robin D.G. Kelly's Black Radical Movements class at Columbia. And that was kind of a few years into my journey of learning about Marsha and her legacy and getting my life on Christopher Street. And I think, probably what happened was I had reached the limits of what a particular form of my life could have taken me. And that was kind of dust to dusting. And so that I was open and ready to receive Marsha's spirit because I was approaching it with like a lot of just curiosity and fun. There was like a level of like, you know, nothing serious is going on here. This is before camera phones and cell phones in general. This is like, the early 2000s. We were just taking disposable photos of each other, and which meant that we would have to see each other again because we would look out for be like, did you develop those photos? Like there would just be this kind of commitment to building community with each other and in knowing that, okay, we're gonna like see each other again. There's a level of accountability. We're really like trying to build friendships and relationships, however fleeting they might be. Um, and so I think what happened was I was just like turning my boat in the stream and allowing myself to move closer to who I really was. And so I didn't have resistance to Marsha showing up, in my um like I was open to receive that spirit. And what did that spirit feel like? It felt like um enthusiasm of like learning about why we're all here on Christopher Street. Like, how did this whole thing get started? Like, we're all here to 5 a.m. Like, why is that? Why this street? Oh, who? Marsha, who? Like, oh, tell me more. Like, oh, we're taking care of each other. There's, support here because of community. How did that get started? And so it was just these little questions that I would ask myself because I needed her. Like, I needed that person that represented a lineage and reflected back possibility. And I was in a place to receive it because I was getting my life and I was finding so much joy with, everyone there.
Um, is there anything that continues to surprise you about her story? I mean, so we spoke about the beginning, and then
Yeah,
know, through so many different iterations, writing about her
right.
and
Yep.
gathering, so many different iterations of
Yeah.
walking with her. Is there anything about her now
Yes.
that continues to surprise you, and what is that?
Absolutely. What is so surprising to me, and at this point it shouldn't be, but it's like at each moment of my life, whether it was kind of writing about the past or being a community organizer or being an artist or, having a spiritual practice, Marsha had a consistent and clear message around each aspect of that life. So she was an incredible organizer. She was fighting for gender affirming care in the 1970s alongside free childcare, right? While she was taking over NYU. She was an incredible performer doing 2 performances a day with the Hot Peaches. She was flying to London and wowing the crowds there. She was also someone who just had such a dedicated spiritual practice because she knew that oppression and violence doesn't just affect our material condition, the amount of money that we have in our pockets, our capacity to rent a home and live with other people, but it also affects our interiority, how we feel about ourselves. And she was a practitioner of changing the way that we feel about ourselves. And she also, so like when I was a campaign organizer around Medicaid, here was Marsha's wisdom. When I was making art and I continue to make art, here's Marsha's wisdom. As I practice a deeper understanding of faith in this world, even when things are so hard, or maybe especially when things are so hard, here's Marsha's wisdom. And so to me, I'm just like floored that every time I have a kind of consistent question about what's going on in my life, Marsha has an answer.
Mm. Speaking of art, I think that you actually have an exhibit that just opened at the Museum of
Yes,
Contemporary Art in Australia, right?
exactly. Yeah. So and there's, a few works about Marsha in it, and a work that I've been working with Marsha's sister Jeannie and brother Bob and nephew Al in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and we're all making sure that, Marsha's legacy in Elizabeth, as well as the activism that's happening in Elizabeth, is, known and understood in the ways that it should. So, yeah.
One of the things that can happen with people is that they get mythologized,
Yeah.
right? In the mythology, in mythologizing them, we lose sight
Yeah.
of as people and
Yes.
as as complex people. And
Exactly.
we're all guilty of mythologizing people and
Yeah.
one sentence to describe them and then
Right.
move, right. And that's a collective kind of human thing. But I think it's particularly true actually with Black people, and then with Black trans people, sort of you get condensed even more. Um,
Exactly.
right. And one of the things that I constantly think about her and all and the things in the array of ways that she had an impact um, is the fact that she was an artist. And I think my own read on her is that as much of anything, she was a performance artist. Like she
Yeah.
was, I think
Exactly.
she
Yeah.
was actually a fantastic performance artist, and
That's exactly right.
what she brought into everything. And because she's an amazing performance artist, I think it's very easy for literally the images of her to be the thing that gets condensed, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
When one of the things that I think we've talked about so many times is that um, Marsha was a visionary. She was a
Yeah.
policy wonk. She
Yeah.
cared about family.
Yeah.
She daydreamed about, vision dreamed about what futures looked like, about
Yeah.
what space travel looked like. There were like
Yes.
she's much more beyond the picture that's on your book, which is the picture that
Yes.
you have in mind, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the image that's used in the Marsha P. Johnson State Park, if my memory
Yeah.
is right.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what your reflections on that are as an
Hmm.
artist yourself. Like, what are
Yeah.
the reflections around being constantly sort of made small by the world, even as they are uplifting us, and then somehow in that process also losing our own complexity? Because I think this is one of the reasons why she did not get her due for such a long time and still
Yeah.
even doesn't in the expansiveness of her humanity, which your book centers, like that process.
Yeah. I mean, I think Marsha was in flight to so many forms of capture. She had just a strong fugitive relationship to,
Mm.
whether it was the capture of the archive in particular way, she was unruly, she was ungovernable. And how did that play out? Well, it played out in a bunch of different ways. So just like you said, she was a performance artist. She went to the MGM studio lot in LA and she said, I'm a star, like give me a job. They said fill out an application. She said, you don't know who I am. That's on you. She went to audition for The Happy Hooker, which was a film, Xavier Hollander, and the casting directors actually called her. They wanted Marsha. And she had this beautiful look. She used to call them her treatments, this a blonde wig and ponytails. And she went up, and the who the casting directors saw her look and were not interested. And she talks about, I immediately walked to Andy Warhol's studio and made him take a portrait of me. And then she said, because a lot of times it's not what other people think about you, it's this is a direct quote, what you think about yourself, right? So she was, regardless of the conditions, so fully calibrated to her worthiness and her value and her power that she wasn't going to say, oh, yes, casting director, or oh, yes, police officer, you're gonna now tell me how to feel about myself. She wasn't having that. She would not allow other conditions, other actors, other agents, other people to have power over how she understood herself. And so much so too, like, you know, Marsha remembered the exact song playing on the jukebox in 1969 in Stonewall in the back room of the bar. Marvin Gaye heard it through the grapevine so many times, again and again and again through the 60s and 70s and the early 80s. People would ask her and she would say it. And then 1988, 1989, she's talking about, well, actually, Stonewall happened in August on my birthday. I didn't get there till days later. It was this beautiful non-coherence, right? That I think helps evade a kind of like capture of a person, being stuck in amber, being static. And part of that was because of trauma and how that affects memory. By that point, she was living with a bullet in her back for about 8 years. And the emergence of the HIV and AIDS crisis was, and continues to be, and in that moment, truly harrowing. And so, memory for Marsha was malleable and beautiful. Leah Lakshmi, who I quoted earlier, talks about the Stonewall riots as being non-neurotypical events. Riots in general, they're not neurotypical events, they're neuroqueer, neurodivergent moments. And Marsha herself was that. And so there are all of these ways that Marsha was truly unruly to the norms and the forms at the time that I think are really important for us to remember right now. Um, that, during her time, as you so rightfully said, played a role in people not totally understanding her legacy. For instance, David Carter in the footnotes of Stonewall, the book, um, there's a line about Marsha which says, Marsha's not remembered as a primary player in the Stonewall Uprising, in part because of her own inconsistent recollections, right? So, like, tons and tons of people saw Marsha there, and yet Marsha had a level of deviance and incoherence that to me is so beautiful, so profound, and also played a role in not being captured in the archive in a particular way.
What for you is profound about it? I think that like I mean, most people, I mean, probably people listening is like, don't you want to be remembered in a certain way? Like, I'm wondering why you think that.
Yeah. I think that the archives aren't neutral places, right? So I lean on people like Sadia Hartman, who writes, whether it was Wayward Lives or Venus in Two Acts. The archives are actually incredibly violent places that don't reflect truth, they reflect facts. So the fact of the day depends on who a journalist esteems valuable to interview in that moment. So often it is not queer, transgender, nonconforming, people of color, Black trans women, Black trans people. It is the people who look good and can speak well on camera. And so the fact of the matter was, a moment like that was not led by, first and foremost, people who looked good and can speak well on camera. It was street people, it was street queens, it was, um, a beautiful moment of uprising. And so what Hartman suggests is that we do not look at the archive and the capture of the archive, it is not a neutral place, as the paramount place of truth. We look at it for all of the challenges that it has. And so to me, Marsha's fugitive relationship with being captured, and I use that word purposefully, by an archive, illustrates her knowingness that that isn't the sole place that truth exists, and
Mhm.
often truth doesn't exist there at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, one of the things that I think is fascinating about her is that there are disputes about how she died by people who are
Yep,
close to her, right? There are these
yep,
different accounts of what happened. And on some level, I think that she would want it that way, right?
yeah,
Some
yep,
if she was unruly throughout her life, it's sort of unruly, it's hard to be defined, right? Even in
yes,
like that would be a consistency. And I think that she would be, in some respects, fascinated
yep.
by different stories of how she left, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Um, One of the things that I think that your book is really brilliant at is it tells the story, like any great biography, right? You have to tell the story of the time and the
Mm-hmm.
person, right? Like if you are talking about Times Square, New York, as if it was Times Square in 2025, just with Marsha P. Johnson,
Right,
your book is failing, right?
right, exactly.
One of the things that your book, because you have to contextualize her in her own time, which is what makes her radical, right? Like that's how
Exactly.
it's out, is because you juxtaposed her against space and time, and then she's so much larger than life.
Yes.
um but within that is not only a place, but you do such an incredible job of describing a community, right? The
Oh,
community
thank
that
you.
she was in, right? And what that community was up to. And one of the things that I was intrigued by was, Marsha buying hotel rooms in Times
Yes.
Square for everyone so that they would be like safe and be able to have a place after working and could get fed and clothed. And then a part of the thing that they did was to dream about the world that they wanted to live in and that they were building.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about that,
Yeah.
importance of, in some respects, we're living out the results of these conversations,
That's exactly right.
tells by former trans sex workers in
That's
times.
right. Yeah, I mean, so to contextualize it, it's they used to call these rooms, these hourly hotels, hot spring hotels. And they were hot spring hotels because whether it was winter, spring, summer, or fall, it was boiling in there. It was very hot. You couldn't open a window. It'd be the summer, the heat was on. It was really it wasn't cute. And yet it provided great relief from the harsh conditions on the street in Times Square because in Times Square, just like all of New York City, you could be arrested and put in jail if you were wearing three articles of clothes that weren't associated with the gender you were assigned at birth. So Marsha and Sylvia, Bambi Bubbles, so many of the girls were being consistently arrested because of these laws. And so Marsha had this practice of if it's hot outside, step into the shade. And what did it mean? So the three articles of closed laws, the harsh conditions on the street meant it was hot outside. Let's step into the shade. What does that mean? Step into the shade of an hourly hotel to start to ask each other these questions in that kind of Fred Moten speculative sense over and over and again, like when might we feel a greater sense of freedom and not need for it to happen the next day or the day after that, or the day after that. Allow for, and this was Marsha's brilliance, a period of gestation. Just like a gardener doesn't plant a sunflower seed in the plot of land and wake up the next morning feeling incredibly discouraged because a huge sunflower stalk isn't there. Marcia knew it took some time for her big visions, her big freedom dreams to come about, and she was clocking them as they came about. And so she also knew you couldn't go from feeling incredibly powerless to incredibly powerful all at once. You couldn't go from deep fear to joy all at once. There were some steps in between, and one would be anger. When you're feeling incredibly afraid, reaching for a bit of anger can be a powerful self-actualizing force. That's what Stonewall was. So it was a collective moment of anger, of turning over the table in righteous indignation about these conditions that didn't match how beautiful, powerful, or valuable our community was. right after that, Marsha knew it was important to harness that momentum. And that's why they created the formation of STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, inside New York University's basement, which was another place that they were dreaming about, when might things be better and how might that exist. And so they wrote a real manifesto, right? Like it was very specifics. And I'm going to read just a couple paragraphs. They wanted, we want the right, this was from inside New York University in 1970. We want the right to self-determination over the use of our bodies, the right to be gay anytime, any place, the right to free psychological change and modification of sex on demand, the right to dress free and adorn ourselves, the end to all job discrimination against transvestites, the immediate end of police harassment and arrest, the end of exploitive practices of doctors and psychiatrists who work on our community. We want trans people who live as members of the opposite gender to be able to obtain identification, like right now when we're talking about passports, right? Um, of the opposite gender. Trans and gay people and all oppressed people should have free education, healthcare, clothing, food, transportation, and housing. Trans and gay people should be granted full and equal rights on all levels of society. So things that we are continuing to build momentum and movement build around and galvanize around and point out how, we need to do more of, they were talking about so forcefully in 1970. And that came, hot in the heels off of those hot spring hotel rooms where they were just dreaming beyond what was. They were using the harsh conditions not as this is all it's going to be, but as a jumping off point for, okay, we know we don't want that and we don't deserve that. What do we want? And I think that is where one of the many ways, Marsha's visionariness is so clear, right? She was writing this manifesto. I remember finding it in New York Public Library and Arthur Bell's box. And, Marsha didn't have an archive at the time, which points to the problems of the archive and just having chills. Like she was saying these things so long ago. So, yeah.
Yeah. I just want to remind everyone to, if you have questions, to please put those. There's a prompt at the bottom of the dashboard. I'll turn to them in a minute. I know we have one, but we'll come to them as a collective. On that particular point, Tourmaline, one of the things that I find fascinating is that one of the things is that she lived at a time of as you say, that it was collective, it was a sense of them forming community, right?
Yes.
To advance each other. And not
Yeah.
as in community as in gathering, but community as
Right.
in a force, right?
Yeah.
Force that they had to work with and through. But one of the things that we live in is a time prompted by, these things, our phone,
Right.
is that it prizes sort of individual branding. It
Uh,
prizes individual separation, right?
yeah.
That's how you build an audience, right? And
Right.
that's how you monetize things, is by
Right.
building a specific thing. And those things are in contradiction to each other in a way. And I just think about the fact that we have to figure out ways to recapture some
Yeah.
of that, because that is one of the ways that we got here, was them
Yeah.
collectively dreaming and collectively doing and collectively acting. And so I'm wondering if those are things that you thought about as well, or think about as well.
Yeah. So consistently, I think my community organizing days were made possible by those freedom dreams, those vision dreams that Marsha had in hot spring hotels. So work around, ending Medicare's exclusions for trans and nonconforming people, a hugely successful campaign because we were a community force. We were filled with different ideas and disagreements, and yet we came together in the midst of a mess of a thing and we made a demand and we made a strategy and we broke down our tactics and we were like, actually, this is really fun. We're gonna disrupt business as usual. We're gonna remind each other about why this is important. And because we're doing that, it's easier to remind the rest of the world. And so we found out like actually we do have the power when we come together to really change these conditions and do it fast. And so to me, that has, and there are other campaigns that I was involved in that were very similar to that, like access to welfare and also stopping a jail in the South Bronx. And so to me, those were so formative because I really firsthand understood the power of, what it means when we just as a few, few people come together, how we can change the world.
Mhm. Um, what lessons do you think that her unruliness tell us about um, how to deal in this moment? I mean, I
Yeah.
think in some respects, I mean, she was actually a contemporary of his, but I don't think that she would be terribly surprised by a Donald Trump. That's just
No, yeah. It's interesting because I was like looking for photos of the two of them. Like I wouldn't be surprised because, she I mean this is a whole aside. It's like she was going to clubs that he, would frequent and I'm sure at some point I'll find some. But all that to say, also she got arrested at the Trump casino in New Jersey. Like she was very aware of Donald Trump and like many, New Yorkers couldn't stand him. And so um I think she wouldn't be surprised. I think so much of her message is that, yes, these conditions are harsh, but they don't get to determine how we understand ourselves. And that is key. Like for me, I've come to realize that's not a throwaway thing. When you like take your power back over your clarity and how you feel and how you understand yourself away from people who could never, right? You get to dream a dream of a different world. And so let just very concretely, that was, not too long ago, the healthcare campaign in New York. New York State had a specific exclusion for trans and gender nonconforming people to access healthcare under Medicaid. And you know, that was something that Marsha was fighting for, and then, Pataki put it in place. And so we together were like, okay, this isn't okay. And we're going to now pivot to what we do want. We're going to use this as a springboard to think about the world that we do want because these people don't get to determine how we feel about ourselves, how we care for ourselves, how we commune with ourselves, how we build power with ourselves. And I think that's Marsha's message consistently, whether it's, trans and gender nonconforming people in prison and the elimination of, rules and regulations to keep our incarcerated trans siblings safe, or whether it's the repeal of access to healthcare or passports and identification changes. Like Marsha was a visionary fighting for all of these things in her time and was really consistent saying, yes, it's not okay, and yes, we can change these things."
yeah, and that a point about the conditions not defining you. I mean, that's her life, right? I mean, that is
Exactly.
literally everything. If you that's if you overlay that on everything, it's like the algorithm to default,
Yes.
right?
That's it. That's
Yeah,
exactly right. That's
it,
exactly it. Yeah,
it explains everything, and you don't
it
need to
really does.
learn that. Like that's the key. And it also reminds me that that's also the way that people have survived these conditions in the past, right? That's how people
Yes, Samara.
determined, and that's how people survived enslavement. That's how,
That's right.
relay that essential learning.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, I want to turn to one of our audience questions that we got. And
Yep.
again, like you all should feel free to send those in. And this is so important. We've spoken about this in before that people think about trans people or trans people like Marsha as without family, but she very much,
Yes.
you spoke about being connected with them. Can you talk about her
Yeah.
kind of then and now? Like, how are they engaging with her legacy?
Yeah. So, a great question from John D'Amelio. Um, and so important, right? I think, Marcia had a complicated relationship for a while with her family and Elizabeth. Um, And so she, she talked about the challenges, which were real. So she talked about, her mom not understanding why she would be trans and not having a general sense of the LGBTQIA plus community. And at the same time, Marsha was bringing home her fellow, street queens to Elizabeth, New Jersey in the 60s and 70s. Like she was, and her mom was cooking for all of them. It was, Augusto Machado, who's a dear friend and contemporary of Marsha. Some of my favorite stories from Augusto are like Augusto talking about how everyone would gather with Marsha and take the train there. And Al Michaels, Marsha's nephew, was talking, told me about Sylvia and Marsha became Al's babysitters. And, Sylvia Rivera for Al Michaels was Aunt Sylvia. And so it just is so beautiful. Like just like many families, there are contradictions and challenges. But one of the most moving parts of, this interview with Marsha, where she's talking about some of the challenges with her family, is she says very clearly, like, whoever's going to write my life story, I want to make sure to thank all those beautiful people from Elizabeth, New Jersey, who helped me up the hill, especially my mom and my dad. And she mentions, her siblings and nephews too, and nieces. And so to me, she had a really profound relationship where she changed Elizabeth, New Jersey, right? Like just by being Marsha, and she changed her family, and her family changed her too. And I think that's a really great question.
I was sitting here frantic, searching, can't speak now, searching frantically because John, who is on the board of the LGBT
Yes.
Museum, actually sent me these pictures of Marsha P. Johnson that
Wow.
he took. And
Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge John D'Amelio fan, like very thankful for all of the work. So, yeah.
trying to find those pictures. Um, when you think about what else she has to teach us beyond
Yeah,
what we know as we like, because the thing about her legacy is that it's going to continue to unfold, right?
exactly.
I'm wondering what else do you think is in store for the world from her story? What are the other surprises
Yeah.
that we have left?
Totally. I mean, one of the things that Marsha in the 90s was talking about was solidarity. And that's kind of an overused word these days, but Marsha was talking about the US imperialism. And she said, why is the US, why in the basement of West Village apartment while she was being filmed, she said, why the US is going to war in Iraq? Oil. She had a really clear analysis of global politics and the role of imperialism and the role of the US and solidarity. And so I think that's really important for us to remember in this moment too. Um, as you can't turn on the news or open a phone without, um, knowing more about what's going on in a way that doesn't reflect the world that we deserve. And so Marcia was critical in that. So
I mean, what's fascinating about that is understanding, like, there's so many people like, I don't want to deal with politics or whatever. But one of the things that you're underscoring is that, like, she was very much connected to the world around her.
yeah,
She understood the way in which, like, these
exactly.
forces were directly impacting her, right? So the idea of like going to war over oil wasn't just something that was happening somewhere else. Like she
Right.
understood the way that that was like shaping the consciousness of possibility for her day to day.
Yeah, exactly. And she was tying it to, like ACT UP had that great action, like fight AIDS, not Arabs. That was their slogan. And she was tying that to the defunding of care for people with HIV and AIDS and the increased funding for US military. Right. She had, just a very real analysis on the world. So yeah.
I actually found the pictures, John, and these are taken from John's apartment, I believe in this.
Wow.
And this is Marsha, like literally with her hair down. That's standing in John's apartment
Oh my God. Oh my God. These are amazing.
to you. And then here's another one.
Oh my God, for the newspaper. Yes. Hold on, let me screenshot that too. Oh my God. Thank
I'll
you,
send it to you right
John.
now. I'll
Wow.
send
Thank you. Thank you, Amara, and thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Mm.
And I think so see, she continues to show up
That's
unexpectedly.
what I mean. Exactly. That's exactly right. And we're gonna just find out more, yeah, we're just gonna find more and more.
One last question that I think is an important one because I asked you about this before, but I think in this forum where we're talking about LGBTQ history, that this is a
Yeah.
really like point to make. I mean, there's so many points that she her life makes about our history, but one of the fascinating things to me is the way in which the Christian nationalists and authoritarian movements who are anti-trans have seized upon her
Yeah.
gender identity and are using it to weaponize it
Yes.
trans people, right? They're like, she didn't identify as trans. That's not the word she used for herself. She identified as gay. And this is proof that this thing is that you guys are is made up and that you're choosing made up heroes. What do you think that she would say to that
I think she would just laugh. I mean, the truth of the matter was, like, she went on estrogen in 1970, right? And she was gonna, she identified to Alan Young as a pre-op transsexual woman. Like those are her words, right? And also she planned to get a vaginoplasty. And she was trying to, she was like, I don't want to go to John Hopkins. I want to go to this other place. It, and also like her language around her gender changed all the time, just like how she talked about Stonewall. I just think, she would just be like, this is so silly. And the idea that trans people aren't, um, it's part of the same thought of like, um, it's the same kind of underpinning logic of like, oh, Marsha didn't have anything to do with Stonewall, therefore trans people aren't real. Oh, Marsha was a gay man, therefore trans people aren't real. I think she should just be it's like it's a really I think she just like okay like okay, hope that serves you like and gets you where you need to go because it has no juice that it has no fuel to build anything, that kind of logic and argument. Yeah.
well, those people would have been her clients at night as well, too. That's the
That's
irony.
the thing.
I,
And they probably weren't. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
well, on that note, thank you so much again for the care and the vision of your book and for bringing the humanity and the expansiveness of who she is into public consciousness. Every single accolade this book has gotten is well deserved. And if you all have not or are looking for a gift this holiday season for someone that you love or someone who's trans, like this is a perfect thing to give someone. And if you don't want to pay money, get them a library membership.
Yeah,
Pick it up
you
from the
know,
library.
exactly. It's in libraries. The audiobook is also in libraries for people who are not like reading in that particular way, and I read the audiobook. So, yeah. And Amara, thank you so much for these brilliant questions and being such a continued, fierce, dedicated Marsha champion and a champion of our entire community. That what you raised about the difference between building real community versus building a brand is at the heart of your praxis. Like you are consistently so creating community and reminding us all the time, not just of our lineage and of our past, but of our now moment in time potential to transform the world. You're just tireless in it, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, there's one last fun question. We'll let them do that. I wouldn't have occurred to me to ask this. Who's your celebrity crush?
Who's my celebrity crush or who's
Yeah.
Marsha's celebrity crush?
Celebrity. Well, let's answer both. Who do you think would have been her celebrity crush at the time, and who's your?
Yeah. Okay. You know, who was Marsha's celebrity crush? Who do you think Marsha's celebrity crush was?
I think she would have been a huge Robert Redford fan.
Literally. Yes.
I mean, that's
Yes.
who she would have been. Put
Yeah. Oh, literally. Yeah, because she had Joe Krutansky, she had lovers who were very similar, right?